And for more, we have Professor Shin Sang-hyup from Kyung Hee University joining me in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, pleased to be here today.
So the president's trip comes at a time when the Hanoi summit between Washington and Pyongyang fell through. So it seems that the political and economic importance of Southeast Asia will become greater. How do you see the president's choice of countries for his first overseas trip of the year?
Well, I think he made a very good decision. I think considering the objectives of his visit to the three Asian member countries, I think it was a good decision. If I added up, excuse me, the economic reasons, right now the trade war between USA and China is going on. And these two countries have been two main destinations of Korean exports. Also, they have been the two main the places where we imported the products. So they have been the two main trade partners for the Korean economy. But because of the ongoing trade war between two countries, definitely we are facing the crisis in our trade. In this context, the diversification of trade relations needed, and then the ASEAN is really one of the most appropriate trading partner for diversification of our Korean and the economy's trade relations. Last year, as of the end of 2018, the trade volume with the ASEAN raised up to $160 billion, which is the second largest one. So definitely the visit to these three ASEAN member countries seems to be very important for further cooperation, economic cooperation with ASEAN member countries. Second one is political reasons, After the Hanoi summit...
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off for a second, but we're getting live footage from former President Chun Doo-han leaving the Gwangju District Court after his libel case. So what you're seeing now is footage of the former president leaving the Gwangju District Court. Now, he had made his way to Gwangju this morning from his home in Seoul, and his libel case lasted for approximately 76 minutes. It started at 2:30 p.m. local time today, this afternoon, and we can see him leaving. Now, we can see that he's having trouble getting into his vehicle. There must be a lot of protesters and reporters on the scene. So he has faced charges of defaming a former late priest known by his Catholic name of Cho Bi-oh. In his memoir that he wrote in 2017, he called the former priest a Satan in a mask and a shameless liar because the priest during his lifetime had made remarks that he had seen helicopter attacks on civilians during the 1980 pro-democracy movement. But Chun had denied those claims flatly in his memoir, and this is the case. If convicted, Chun can face up to 2 years in prison or approximately $4,400 in fine. Okay, my apologies for that.
It's okay.
So back to the president's trip. So the president's overseas trip will definitely be an opportunity to accelerate the new Southern policy and diversify Korea's export partners, like you said. Now, for our international viewers who may be unfamiliar with the term, could you describe to us what the new Southern policy is?
Before answering your second question, let me very briefly explain the political significance of his visit to three Asian member countries. Politically, after Hanoi summit between American President Mr. Trump and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, well, in fact, through the visit to these three ASEAN member countries, President Moon could gather the support from these three ASEAN member countries for his push for the peace settlement of the Korean Peninsula. And these, all 10 ASEAN member countries have diplomatic relations with North Korea. Considering this aspect, definitely his visit to the three ASEAN member countries can contribute to solving the North Korean denuclearization issue. But this is the second political reasons why his decision was quite good. And then to answer your question, then the new Southern policy, which is one of the most important foreign policy initiatives launched by President Moon Jae-in, and it aims to reinforce his the cooperation, his southern policy in order to further, develop and widen the economic cooperations, the political cooperations with the ASEAN member countries. So I think it is very important, and if I had more information and explanation to diversify the Korean trade relations, it seems to be very important for the future Korean economic development. As I already explained, Korean economic structure has been excessively relied on the foreign trade, and then in the foreign trade, the Korea has excessively relied on the trade with the USA and the China. So the diversification with the more countries seems to be very important. We can be a kind of stepping stone for the future, more stable economic development for Korea. So in this context, as I said before, the new northern policy seems to be a very important economic policy for the Korean economy.
So a lot of opportunities there. The first leg of President Moon's trip takes him to Brunei. Now this year also marks the 35th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two. Now Brunei also serves as the coordinator for South Korea-ASEAN dialogue, and the two sides agreed on Monday to expand cooperation and partnership. What do those entail?
Well, in fact, through his visit, President Moon Jae-in and his counterpart in Brunei could deepen and widen the bilateral cooperation in the field, and particularly in the energy industrial sector and the construction of infrastructure. As you know very well, Brunei has abundant natural resources such as gas and oil. So from the developing these oil well and then the processing the oils for the final consumers, all those processes are needed high technologies, and Korea could participate in those kind of projects. And also the Korean government could discuss further how to work together to develop the Brunei patent system. So this could be the subject on the talks between two leaders in Brunei.
So after the president wraps up his trip to Brunei, he will head to Malaysia, which has had diplomatic relations with Seoul for almost 60 years now. Now, Malaysia is also one of the biggest consumers of South Korea's Hallyu content. Now, here, President Moon will sit down for a summit with the King and Prime Minister. What sort of economic cooperation do you think?
Malaysia is one of the industrialized economy among 10 ASEAN member countries, which means they have high technologies and to some high technologies. So to discuss about the how to cooperate in developing or sharing the high technologies between two governments, and so in other words, that maybe two leaders will discuss about the future-oriented partnership between two countries, and also they could discuss about the future technologies like the smart city project, something like that. So maybe the main topics at the talk between two leaders in Malaysia will be discuss about how to cooperate the science and high technologies between two countries.
So the final leg of the president's trip takes him to Cambodia. Now, the country has seen its economy grow more than 7% a year during the past 2 decades. And it's also considered a popular tourist destination and attractive investment point among South Koreans. What sort of economic advantages does Cambodia have?
Well, Cambodia is emerging as one of the destinations of, favorable destinations for the tourists. At the same time, Cambodia has been regarded as one of the most favorable destinations of foreign direct investment. Well, Korean the manufacturers have sought for the good places for the new destination for their foreign direct investment. You know, through the foreign direct investment, they want to open their factories and they can start their business activities in those countries. Well, considering the economic circumstances in Cambodia, I think certainly Cambodia is one of the most favorable destinations of the Korean FDI because they have good quality labor forces and the labor prices are quite moderate. And then the government, the Cambodian government has provided various incentives to attract foreign direct investments. So in this context, well, Cambodia could be one of the most ideal the future trading partners or economic partners for Korean economy. And at the same time, Cambodia has a comparative advantages in agricultural sector, so it can be a potential industrial area for the further cooperation between the Korean agriculture industry and the Cambodian the agriculture industry, I think.
So through the president's new southern policy, the country is seeking to diversify its export market that has been heavily reliant on the U.S. and China. Now, bilateral trade between South Korea and ASEAN, like you mentioned previously, had hit a record high of $160 billion last year. Now, Seoul wants to expand that figure to $200 billion by 2020 under this new policy.
Right.
It must make this trip extra important. What's your take?
Well, I think the President Moon Jae-in, when he was the presidential candidate, he emphasized that the economic cooperation with the ASEAN member countries should be important as much as the importance with the so-called four major the countries neighboring the Korean Peninsula. They are the Russia, Japan, China, and USA. So to diversify trade relations and to increase their trade volume with the ASEAN member countries, definitely this visit to three ASEAN member countries can be a stepping stone for the future economic cooperation with ASEAN member countries. I think we have to understand, interpret this visit to the three ASEAN member countries in this context.
Just before we let you go, do you see any tasks ahead when he's implementing this new policy?
Well, certainly to have a very successful outcome in the new third policy, definitely we have to build the fundamentals for future cooperation between South Korea and the ASEAN member countries. What I mean is, by promoting exchange of the human resources, we have to expand and then deepen the mutual understanding between Korea and ASEAN member countries. Based on the mutual understanding between two countries, they should have to make every effort to develop promote the quality and quantity of the relations between Korea and the ASEAN member countries, which will be quite different from the previous policies taken by the Korean government. In the past, we thought that the ASEAN is just about some potential trade partners or not very big potential trade partners for the Korean economy. But right now, everything has been changed. So with the different perspectives, with the different approaches toward ASEAN member countries, Korean government should have developed and implement the policies very continuously. I think that will be the way for us to have the very successful outcomes in the new southern policy, I think.
So hopefully the president's trip will bear some fruitful outcomes this time.
So.
Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you. My pleasure.